That. There goes the recording. Okay, good morning. Glad to see you. We're in Vermont. We're at the National Farm Worker Ministry Board meeting, which Loretto has been involved with from the beginning of its inception as actually part of its creation. And so we've come to the board meeting, and the board meeting this year is centering on the farm workers that are working in the dairy industry. And from my standpoint, as of 2 years ago, I was not even aware of the dairy industry living out in Wyoming. So we're going to be sharing information from Migrant Justice and about their campaign, Milk with Dignity. I'm here with Will Lambic, who will introduce what his role is here. He's going to translate for us. And Rosie Atario
Alfaro.
Again.
Está bien. Alfaro.
Thank you. And she's going to be sharing with us. Before we start, Maureen's has agreed to have a reflection for us.
Good morning, everybody. This is a prayer from the National Farm Worker Ministry. Gracious and justice-loving God, we ask your special blessing on our farm and dairy workers, our neighbors who are among the most abused workers in the United States. They work long and hard to grow the food we eat, but they cannot always afford to feed their families. We know your desire is for all people to thrive and live lives of wholeness, but poverty and mistreatment block most of these workers from this goal. Please give us the courage and commitment to support this worker's struggle for justice. Let us be your hands to help loose the bonds of injustice and undo the thongs of the yoke. Let us be your voice crying out for a world where justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. We pray that one day, soon, all workers will fairly share in the abundance you have given this world. Amen.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. My name is Will Lambic. I'm part of the staff team at Migrant Justice. I'll be presenting a little bit later on and helping to facilitate the space, but for most of it, I'll be interpreting for my colleague Rosie, who will introduce herself now. And then once she does, we'll share screen and we have some slides and videos for you while we talk.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Rosie Alfaro, soy parte de Justicia Migrante. Queremos darle la bienvenida a esta presentación que tenemos, que es de Justicia Migrante, y también queremos agradecer a los anfitriones por estar aquí presentes, como la comunidad Loreto, el Comité Latinoamericano y Caribeño.
So hello, everybody. My name is Rosie Alfaro. I'm part of the staff team at Migrant Justice. I work as a community organizer. And we want to start by thanking our hosts for this presentation, the Loreto community and the Latin American and Caribbean Committee.
Sí, pues hoy estaremos hablando de justicia migrante y del programa de leche con dignidad, y también sobre la campaña que tenemos con Hannaford para invitar que se una al programa de leche con dignidad.
And so today we'll be talking to you about our organization, Migrant Justice, the program we've created called Milk with Dignity, and our current campaign to get a supermarket chain called Hannaford Supermarkets to join that program.
Pues Justicia Migrante es una organización que está creada y liderada por la comunidad de trabajadores inmigrantes en los ranchos lecheros del noreste.
Migrant Justice is an organization founded and led by the community of immigrant farm workers in the Northeast United States.
Sí, construimos la voz y el poder en la comunidad, y también involucramos aliados para avanzar los derechos humanos y justicia económica.
As an organization, our mystery is to build the voice, power, and capacity of our immigrant community membership and to connect with allies to move forward our struggles for human rights and economic justice.
Sí, pues la historia de Justicia Migrante comenzó hace más de 13 años.
Migrant Justice's history goes back about 13 years.
Y todo comenzó por la tragedia muerte de un compañero de la comunidad que se llamaba José Obed.
And it begins with a tragedy, the death of a young dairy worker named José Obed.
Y eso fue lo que reveló a más de 1,000 trabajadores sosteniendo la industria aquí en Vermont.
And Jose Obeth's preventable workplace death uncovered a community of more than 1,000 dairy workers living and working on dairy farms, sustaining the dairy industry in the state of Vermont.
Eso fue, la muerte de José Obed fue la chispa para salir y empezar a organizarnos, como tener igual varias campañas, muchos logros, pero siempre enfocándonos en los derechos humanos.
And his death was also a spark for that community to begin to organize ourselves, to come out of the shadows, and to begin to work together in organizing campaigns that have resulted in many victories, though we know that we have much struggling left to do. And we've had campaigns focused on a number of issues, but always with a focus on our rights as workers.
Sí, y nuestra red y la membresía, pues es aquí en el estado de Vermont, pero a través de los años hemos expandido y ahora estamos organizando igual en los ranchos alrededor del estado.
And so our base, our history started in the state of Vermont, but over the years, we've begun to organize with workers in neighboring states around the Northeast.
Sí, los inmigrantes sostenemos la industria lechera aquí en Vermont y en el noreste y por todo el país.
Immigrant farm workers sustain the dairy industry, both here in Vermont, around the Northeast, and across the country.
Sí, y pues el 80 y el 90% de los trabajadores somos de México y de Guatemala y se trabaja todo el año.
In Vermont, 80 to 90% of dairy laborers are from Latin America, either from Mexico or Guatemala. And this is a year-round occupation, working 365 days a year.
Sí, como también hay ranchos relativamente pequeños, aislados, invisibles, que no se ve realmente y muchos ganando menos del sueldo mínimo, igual muchos sin un día de descanso.
Oh, dairy farms are relatively small, just a few workers, meaning that we're oftentimes working in isolation from others and from our community, and as a community are rendered in basically invisible. Most of us are working on farms making below the minimum wage. The average worker is working 60 to 80 hours a week. About half of us work 7 days a week without getting a day off.
Sí, como también vivimos donde trabajamos y trabajamos donde vivimos. También como no tener una vivienda digna, compartiendo como habitaciones, cuartos, hasta 3 o 4 compañeros.
We live where we work and work where we live. That means that most of us are in employer-provided housing that oftentimes is unfit for human habitation. It's overcrowded, it lacks basic sanitary provisions, oftentimes old housing stock that's falling apart.
A veces hasta con faltas de agua, calefacción y pues en todo tiempo de invierno mucho sufrimiento para la mayoría de los que vivimos así.
Oftentimes this housing doesn't have potable water, it doesn't have working heating, which means that in the winter, living in these houses, we suffer greatly.
Como también altos porcentajes de accidente por químicos, maquinarias, animales y pues también la falta de protecciones laborales.
This is a dangerous industry, meaning high rates of illnesses and injuries from working with animals, heavy machinery, and chemicals. And this is exacerbated by a lack of training and access to personal protective equipment on the job.
Sí, y también estamos expuestos al acoso sexual, a la discriminación, por género, despidos injustos y a veces hasta violencia, de tráfico humano.
And these workplaces have no enforceable protections of labor rights, meaning that their abuses are rampant, like sexual harassment, discrimination, unjust and retaliatory firings, even violence and human trafficking.
Sí, como he mencionado, muchos ranchos malos que no respetan los derechos de los trabajadores y no tenemos buenos beneficios, pero también hay ranchos buenos, no todo tiene que ser igual.
I've explained a lot of the pervasive abuse that happens in the industry, the poor conditions that many of us face. But at the same time, we know that there are farms out there that do provide dignified conditions and respect for workers on the job. So we know that there's nothing inevitable about this mistreatment.
Ujú. Y pues sí, y ahora también queremos ver porque tenemos testimonios de diferentes compañeros.
No, esto será más tú.
Ok, sí, bueno, tenemos como muchos testimonios. De mi parte fue una de las, antes de estar aquí con Justicia Migrante, también fui una trabajadora, en un rancho, aquí en el estado de Vermont.
And so giving a little bit of my own personal testimony, before I started as an organizer with Migrant Justice, I was a farm worker living and working on a dairy farm in Vermont.
Y como ya he mencionado las malas condiciones que hemos vivido, como por ser mujer, a veces no te pagan lo que debe ser por el simple hecho que eres mujer, aunque a veces haces el mismo trabajo que hacen los hombres.
And I've shared a little bit in general about the poor conditions and discriminatory treatment that workers face. And I wasn't exempt from that when I was working as a woman on this farm. I wasn't paid the same as the male farm workers, and I was treated as less than them.
Corremos más el riesgo también de sufrir acoso sexual. Lo hemos sufrido como experiencias no solo mías, sino de también muchas personas más.
We run a great risk on these farms of experiencing sexual harassment. I did it in my own person, and I'm not the only one.
Sí, realmente no tenemos como un día de descanso donde podamos descansar bien, poder como hablar con nuestros familiares.
I didn't have a full day off where I could rest for an entire day and have time to speak with my family back in Mexico.
Sí, y también quiero contar un poco, este es un poquito de mi historia, aunque hay mucho más, y también quiero contar un poquito del testimonio de un compañero.
That's a little bit about my own personal story, although I could tell you much more. But I also want to speak a little bit about the experiences of a coworker of mine.
Él estuvo trabajando en un rancho en el norte de aquí de Vermont.
He was working on a farm in the northern part of Vermont.
De repente él comenzó con muchos dolores en el diente, en la muela.
And he started developing a lot of pain in his teeth, in a molar.
Él tuvo que hablar con el patrón y decirle que necesito ir al doctor.
And he spoke to his boss and said, "Hey, I need to go see a dentist."
Él fue al doctor y le hicieron una cirugía.
He went to the dentist and he had a surgery on his tooth.
Entonces él le dieron como, después de la cirugía, le dieron cuántos días tenía que descansar hasta que él se recupere, o para no tener como una infección más grande, no tenía que trabajar.
And getting out of the surgery, the doctor told him, okay, you need to rest for this many days and take time off so that you can recover and lower the risk of an infection in your mouth.
Entonces él fue y se lo dijo al patrón. Y pues el patrón se aferró y le dijo que no, que él tenía que trabajar así. Y pues él sintió mucho dolor y tuvo que regresarse a descansar.
And so when he returned to the farm, he told the boss, okay, I need to rest after the surgery. And the boss on the farm got really mad and said, no way, you have to get back to work. So he started, but because the pain in his mouth was too great, he couldn't continue and he left his shift.
Entonces él se fue a descansar y cuando volvió al trabajo le dijeron que ya no había más trabajo para él.
So he rested a bit, and when he felt well enough, he tried to go back. But when he did, the boss told him, nope, you don't have work here anymore.
Y también en el momento de decir, tienes que irte de la vivienda, a veces no dan la oportunidad de cuando te despiden de que te quedes unos días más para buscar dónde puedes ir o dónde conseguir otro trabajo.
And because we are living on the farms, when we lose our job, we lose our housing as well. So oftentimes when you get fired from a farm, they don't give you time to stay in the house so that you can set up your next move or find out where you can go. You just have to pack your stuff and get out.
Sí, y eso sigue sucediendo. Hace apenas una semana estamos trabajando también con unos compas de que igual fueron despedidos de su trabajo injustamente, sin saber por qué, y a veces sin querer pagarles lo de la semana que ellos han trabajado.
And this continues to happen. It's endemic in the dairy industry. Just last week, we supported workers who had the same thing happen to them. They were fired and run off the farm. And oftentimes when that happens, the farmer will refuse to pay the last week's wages.
Sí, entonces son condiciones de vida que todavía se lleva, que todavía no han cambiado y que, bueno, pues eso es lo que queremos, como trabajar y mejorar las condiciones de vida porque somos seres humanos y merecemos una vida digna.
So these abuses are systemic in the industry and ongoing, and that is why Migrant Justice exists, to fight to change these conditions, because we're human beings and we deserve rights.
Y a veces nos preguntamos por qué las condiciones tienen que ser así. Aunque hay ranchos que intentan como hacer las cosas bien, a veces económicamente no pueden.
So within Migrant Justice, seeing these conditions, we began to ask ourselves, why are conditions the way they are? Because we see that there are certain farms that want to do right by their employees, but the structure of the industry creates limitations on what they provide.
¿Sí? Y para entender la situación desde la raíz, tenemos que ver la estructura de la industria y entender sobre las cadenas de abastecimiento.
So to stop these abuses at their root, we need to understand the structure of the industry. And to do that, as workers, we began to teach ourselves about this idea called a corporate supply chain.
Sí, y esto no es una situación única. También describe mucho de la economía actual.
And the dairy supply chain isn't particularly unique to our sector, but the way that the dairy industry is structured is very similar to how much of our modern economy is structured.
Y ahora vamos a poner un video corto que explica un poquito más sobre todo esto.
So now we'd like to play a brief video that explains a little bit more about these topics. I think we have too many people connected to the Wi-Fi here. It should come up in a second. We'll just try to do a refresh and see if that does it.
Wi-Fi? I don't know, but I can turn it on. Yeah. Everybody in the other room is too.
Yeah.
Voting.
Y si no se toca el video, yo puedo explicar un poquito. Yeah. All right. Well, in lieu of the video, I'll just give a brief summary of the content. From
food and clothing to electronics, many of the goods we use every day come to us through supply chains. Atop the supply chains are name brands with instantly recognizable logos. In recent decades, these companies have experienced remarkable growth. Mega buyers now wield unprecedented market power to purchase goods and services as cheaply as possible, pressuring suppliers to cut prices or lose out to their competitors. This price pressure drives employers to cut wages and push workers even harder. Sweatshop conditions and dangerous workplaces are the norm. Forced labor and sexual violence take root as well. While much of this exploitation is invisible to consumers, disasters sometimes pierce the veil. To each of these tragedies, corporations respond with crisis management public relations, promise to do better. They point to their voluntary standards without enforcement. Unsurprisingly, nothing changes for workers. But what if there were another path? In recent years, workers have developed a new paradigm for protecting their rights in supply chains. Worker-driven social responsibility has been tested from the agricultural fields of the United States to the apparel factories of Bangladesh. In these harsh environments, WSR has proven its ability to change workers' lives. Here's how. WSR is driven by workers themselves and based in legal agreements with brands at the top of supply chains. This ensures workplace standards are binding and enforceable. Suppliers who violate their workers' rights immediately lose their buyer's business. These agreements also commit brands to pay prices that allow for and incentivize suppliers to comply. Finally, WSR requires independent monitoring in which workers themselves play a frontline role. Real progress is seldom easy, but worker-driven social responsibility offers a blueprint at last to ensure dignified conditions for the 500 million people working in factories, farms, and other workplaces across the world who touch our lives every single day.
Sí, pues junto con otros trabajadores alrededor del mundo nos hemos dado cuenta de este modelo y pues vemos que tanto como trabajadores y rancheros tenemos los mismos intereses en transformar la industria.
So alongside other workers in different sectors and different countries, we've come to understand this idea of organizing within supply chains and we've seen that farm workers and dairy farm owners share many of the same common interests.
Y también que como las compañías que son responsables por el problema también deben ser responsables en poner una solución.
And that it's the companies at the top of the supply chains who are responsible for the conditions that we face. And that means they should be held responsible for becoming part of the solution.
Sí, y pues aplicando el modelo WSR en la industria lechera, creamos leche con dignidad.
So we took this model of worker-driven social responsibility and adapted it to the dairy industry to create the Milk with Dignity program.
Y pues la primera compañía que invitamos a que se una al programa de leche con dignidad fue la compañía Ben & Jerry.
And the first company that we invited to join the Milk with Dignity program was Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream.
Sí. Y pues no aceptaron al inicio. Tuvimos que hacer casi 3 años de presión pública y negociación.
But they didn't agree at the outset, and it took nearly 3 years of sustained public campaigning and negotiating before the company came around.
Hicimos protestas en sus tiendas, teatros, piquetes, su junta directiva y una marcha de 13 millas en su fábrica.
We had protests and street theater in front of their scoop shops. We picketed their board meetings. We marched and rallied, including a 13-mile march to their ice cream factory.
Entonces fue algo que tardó para que ellos acepten. También estuvimos haciendo giras. Como ya mencioné al inicio, no aceptaron.
We gave many presentations like the one we're giving today. It took a long time to get them to come to the table.
Pero el 3 de octubre del 2019 firmaron el primer acuerdo de leche con dignidad.
17.
2017, perdón.
But finally, on October 3rd of 2017, they signed the first Milk with Dignity agreement.
Sí, pues para nosotros fue un momento histórico. Primera vez en la industria que una corporación se sienta con los trabajadores lecheros y firma un acuerdo.
This was a historic moment because this was the first time that a dairy company had ever sat at the table with the workers in their supply chain to sign an agreement.
Pues sí, en el 2017, pues el modelo WSR había llegado a la industria lechera.
So in 2017, the model of worker-driven social responsibility arrived to the dairy industry.
Pues Ben y Jerry ha implementado el programa al 100% en su cadena del noreste.
Ben & Jerry's has now implemented the program in 100% of their Northeast supply chain.
Cubre 200 trabajadores aquí en el estado de Vermont. Bueno, el 20% en el estado de Vermont y también algunos ranchos en Nueva York.
It now covers about 200 farm workers, constituting 20% of Vermont's entire dairy industry, in addition to farms in New York State.
Como también millones de dólares han llegado de la compañía directamente al bolsillo de los trabajadores.
Through the program, millions of dollars have flowed from the company to the pockets of workers in the form of premiums.
Sí, y eso ha llegado como en aumentos de sueldo, bonos, días de vacaciones y otros beneficios más.
This has resulted in raises, bonuses, paid vacation days, among many other benefits to workers.
Y como también a los rancheros como un alivio económico, como un incentivo por su participación en el programa.
And the farm owners also retain a part of that premium from Ben & Jerry's as incentive for their participation and as economic relief for the low prices of milk.
Sí. Pues entonces para nosotros es algo emocionante, algo que le llamamos el nuevo día ha llegado por todos los cambios que han habido.
And so with that, we say the new day has arrived for human rights in the dairy industry.
Sí, y ahora vamos a escuchar, vamos a ver el testimonio de algunos compañeros que ya están en ranchos trabajando donde es leche con dignidad.
And now we're going to play a video of a worker on a Milk with Dignity farm talking about some of the changes he's experienced.
Let's start. Vamos.
Quizás no contamos con esto para poder hacerlo de Jesús luego.
Click, click.
So we're gonna skip over this video, and we will have another one towards the end of the presentation. This was a testimonial video from Rubinai, who's a farm worker in Addison County, Vermont. And for folks who are interested, you can go to our website and at migrantjustice.net. There's a whole testimonials page where you can see videos of workers talking about the benefits in the program. Apologies for the low bandwidth, and we'll go on to the next slide.
Sí, y pues ahora estamos enfocados en expandir el programa a la cadena de Hannaford.
And so now we're focused on expanding the Milk with Dignity program, starting within the supply chain of a supermarket chain called Hannaford.
Que tiene como una cadena de supermercado con casi 200 tiendas alrededor del noreste.
Hannaford is the largest supermarket chain in northern New England. They have about 200 stores around the region.
Como es un comprador muy grande y compran por toda la región y también venden por su propia marca.
They are one of the largest sourcers of dairy products in our region, buying milk and selling it under their store brand label.
Sí, pues es una oportunidad para expandir el programa por todo el noreste.
And so bringing Hannaford into the program will be an opportunity to expand Milk with Dignity to farms around the region.
En el 2019 invitamos a Hannaford a hablar con nosotros y cuando no aceptaron, pues lanzamos una campaña pública.
In 2019, we invited Hannaford to follow in Ben & Jerry's footsteps to join the program. And when they didn't respond, we launched a public campaign.
Durante estos 3 años hemos usado diferentes estrategias para presionar la compañía.
And over the course of the past 3 years, we've used many different strategies and tactics to put pressure on the company.
Como los consumidores han presionado a Hannaford con miles de llamadas, emails, al presidente, postales, presión constante en medios sociales.
Consumers have pressured the company, sending thousands of emails, phone calls, and postcards to the company president, as well as consistent action through social media.
También hemos hecho como acciones lideradas por los trabajadores, como piquetes, marchas a su tienda, caravanas de auto, y durante la pandemia protestas en la oficina central de Maine.
And the campaign has involved many farm worker-led actions, including marches, rallies, pickets in front of their stores. During the height of the pandemic, car caravans from store to store, and actions at their corporate headquarters in Maine.
Pues también hemos estado en solidaridad con muchas más organizaciones, donde han mandado como docenas de cartas, de varios grupos y pues reciben de Hannaford.
And we have received support and solidarity from dozens of organizations and faith communities who have endorsed the campaign and sent letters to Hannaford calling on them to join Milk with Dignity.
Como también de Pride Center, es una organización donde siempre cada año recibían como una beca para poder hacer sus eventos, y pues este año ellos rechazaron esa beca, dijeron que no quieren más eso si no se sientan a la mesa con los trabajadores.
One example is the Pride Center of Vermont, a statewide organization devoted to LGBTQ rights that, among other things, organizes the annual Pride Parade in our state. Last year, they told Hannaford, which annually is the largest sponsor of that parade, that they would no longer accept their money until Hannaford joins the Milk with Dignity program.
Sí, como también hemos llevado la lucha hasta Europa, donde está la madre de Hannaford, Holder Hasey.
We've even brought this campaign to Europe, where Hannaford's parent company, Ahold Delhaize, is based.
Sí. Como también hemos organizado con inversionistas en Ahold, y donde tienen sus reuniones todos los años, los accionistas.
And so Hannaford's shareholders have their annual meeting in the Netherlands, where we've organized investors to put pressure on the company, and have had a presence at those meetings to pressure the Ahold's board of directors.
Y pues durante estos 3 años de campaña los abusos siguen pasando en la cadena de Hannaford, y ahora pues queremos enseñarles un video de un compa en un rancho de Hannaford quien sufrió un accidente muy grave.
But over the course of these years of campaigning, the abuses in Hannaford's supply chain have continued unabated. And so now we're going to show you a video of a worker on a Hannaford farm talking about the conditions. And we'll try a refresh on this. We hope that we can get this video up for you.
Name was familiar to me, but I wasn't sure what I'd gone into. We're buffering still here. Black screen buffering. Come on, give it up.
Mi nombre es Jesús Zúñiga y quiero compartir con ustedes un testimonio que me pasó en un rancho ganadero de vacas lecheras. Quiero compartir con ustedes este testimonio porque me ocurrió un accidente en mi trabajo, el cual el día que ocurre el accidente una máquina que a lo mejor muchos de ustedes conocen, pues un tractor o sea skister, a la hora de estar operando con él, me doy cuenta que esta maquinaria no estaba en buen estado. Entonces yo la reporto ese día en 3 ocasiones y no fui escuchado. Entonces al final del día, pues me ocurre esta desgracia. Si pueden notar aquí en mi pie ahora, pues lo tengo vendado. Igual, ahorita yo tengo una cita en el hospital, con el cual pues me tiene pues preocupado, porque yo padezco de diabetes. Entonces me van a amputar, está en proceso que me van a amputar parte de mi pie. Entonces yo quiero ver pues también, darles a saber que no estamos bien en todos los ranchos, como se dice. Hay uno que reporta las maquinarias y no es uno escuchado. Así es que yo doy este testimonio para que todos luchemos por nuestros derechos. Es lo que yo puedo por mi parte decirles, que hay que luchar porque en todos los trabajos tengamos seguridad laboral. Eso es lo que yo les puedo compartir. Gracias. Y pues de alguna forma también hacerle la invitación a Ganafor para que vea que no todos los ranchos es como él dice. Hay cosas que todavía se necesitan por hacer. Y creo que muchas veces no somos escuchados y aquí está una muestra de eso.
Mm. 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 Mm.
All right, so I'll continue for the final couple slides before we open it up. And I know that's a very difficult video to see. I've seen it many times now, and it doesn't get any easier. And Jesus is now actually back working part-time on the farm. He's doing light duty, hasn't been able to go back fully. So these are the conditions that are prevalent on farms in Hannaford's supply chain. And over the course of the past couple of years, as workers have been denouncing these abuses, Hannaford has felt a need to respond. So last year, they created what they call their Speak Up line, a complaint system where workers in their supply chain can lodge complaints. And Hannaford says that they will be investigated. So when Hannaford created the Speak Up line, workers on the supply chain, with the support of Migrant Justice, began submitting complaints. And workers on 10 farms have submitted complaints. And here we have a few of them. And I'd like to ask for your all's support, if I can get 3 volunteers to read these 3 excerpts.
Sure, I'll read the first one.
Yeah.
The supervisor was a very violent man. He was carrying a machete and he wanted to hurt my mother. My boss fired us for calling the police and told us to leave the house first thing in the morning.
Thank you, Sally. Anybody for number 2?
I'll go
This
number.
place,
Oh,
go ahead, Lillian.
Okay, this place used to be storage for the cows feed. It's not built for housing people. The walls and ceilings are bare plywood. Water drips into my bedroom when it rains. We bathe by mixing cold and hot water in a bucket and then pouring it over ourselves.
And number 3?
Well, on my screen, there seems to be a gray
Yeah, mine too.
blank. There you go. Yeah. Thank you.
Workers only had 3 rooms with 3 beds for 6 of us. So when I went to work, another worker would use the bed I just used. We didn't have any privacy. We didn't want to complain for fear of retaliation.
Thank you very much. So these are just a few of the examples of conditions on dairy farms experienced by immigrant workers. And Hannaford understands that they have a problem, because what company in the world wants their product associated with these abuses and human rights violations? None. But unfortunately, as with most corporations, they see this not as a human rights problem, but as a problem of public relations. And when a company gets a public relations problem, they create a public relations solution. And that is their complaint line. So rather than rigorously investigating these abuses and creating remedies for workers, this complaint line is really just a shell or a cheap imitation of the Milk with Dignity program. We call it a knockoff version of Milk. So on average, it takes Hannaford months to respond, over 3 months before they respond to workers. In some cases, it's gone up to 6 months. In their so-called investigations, they've never once actually spoken with workers on the farm or come to inspect worker housing. And with each investigation that they have, or with each complaint that they have investigated, their response has simply been to say that their investigation, let me get the direct quote, has not, give me just a second.
Well, there it is on the screen, right? The allegations have been investigated and determined to be inconsistent with what was observed at the time of the assessment.
Exactly. So what an insult for them to put out this branch to workers saying submit complaints and we'll protect your human rights, and for this to be the response. And one of these complaints, I should mention, is from the farm where Jesus worked. Workers submitted a complaint. Hannaford sat on that complaint for months without follow-up. And during that time, Jesus was forced to work on a faulty tractor and ended up losing part of his foot. If Hannaford were really serious about protecting workers' rights, they would have responded to the initial complaint, spoken with that farm owner, and it's very possible that Jesus would have his entire foot today. So Hannaford thinks that they can pull the wool over consumers' eyes and trick the public into thinking that they don't need Milk with Dignity because they already are taking measures. And this is the classic playbook of corporations and corporate social responsibility. And it's precisely because of their efforts to fool consumers that we need to be speaking back to them with a clear voice, telling them that we know the difference between a program that truly protects workers' rights and a knockoff that only claims to. And so for that, we have an action that we would like you all to take. Hannaford's social media accounts, and in particular their Facebook, is one of the principal ways that they communicate to their customers. Every day they're putting up nice little human interest stories from their stores, posting coupons and deals and recipes, and workers from the dairy barns and parlors in Hannaford's supply chain are posting comments under those publications, urging the company to join Milk with Dignity. And we would like you all to do the same. So for anyone who has a Facebook account, we ask you to open it up on your computer or on your phone and go to the Hannaford Supermarket page. I'll give you a second to do that. And once you're there, you can find their most recent post. It can be on any topic. Open up the comments underneath that. And you might see a couple comments already there. And we'd urge you to leave a comment yourself. It can be something as simple as just saying, Hannaford, join Milk with Dignity. You can describe in more detail what you've learned today during this presentation and why it's important to you as a person of faith that Hannaford takes this action to protect rights. You can put whatever you'd like.
Hmm.
So we'll give folks a second to make those comments.
Will, is that under Hannaford Supermarkets or a different link?
The page is called Hannaford Supermarket. Their handle, or what comes after the @ is Hannaford. And for those who have finished putting your comment, you can sort of check back under old posts, see who else has been commenting, see what messages they've been putting.
Will, could I ask, maybe you're gonna cover this. What is specifically the commitment that Hannaford would make if they agreed to join Milk with Dignity? What are they committing to do or to change?
Sure. So signing a Milk with Dignity agreement in Hannaford's case would mean sourcing their store brand milk, so the milk on their shelves with the Hannaford label, from farms enrolled in the Milk with Dignity program. So they would need to go to their suppliers and say, if you want to continue to supply to Hannaford, you'll need to join the Milk with Dignity program. Hannaford would then pay those farms a premium, and in turn, those farms would have to abide by the farm worker authored code of conduct and raise their standards to meet the provisions in the code. Good question.
And is it a significant premium?
It is not. It is not something that would break the bank. Hannaford is part of, as we said, this multinational corporation, Ahold Delhaize, which does about $100 billion in annual sales. They saw their profits skyrocket over the last couple of years, first with the pandemic, and then taking advantage of inflationary pricing. They make billions of dollars a year in profits, and they're spending that money to enrich their biggest shareholders and executives with lavish bonus packages and spending over $1 billion a year in stock buybacks, basically putting that profit into their own pockets. So certainly this is a company that can afford to ensure protection for human rights in their supply chain.
Is there any way to enforce a requirement that they not pass the slight increase in price they pay for milk on to their consumers?
That would be at the discretion of the company. With Ben & Jerry's, when they joined, there was no subsequent increase in the price of ice cream. That was a cost. The cost of the program came out of the company's bottom line. It was not passed on to consumers. But we'll just actually finish up the slide, and then we'll open it up fully to questions. So I hope most folks have been able to leave a comment, and we really encourage you to make this a part of your daily routine. Workers every day are leaving comments, and allies can do it as well. So when you're brushing your teeth in the morning, and maybe you're already looking at your phone, take a minute just to leave a comment for Hannaford. It only takes 30 seconds or less. And this can be a consistent way, wherever you are in the country, to show materially your support and solidarity for the human rights of dairy workers. And with that, we'll open it up to more questions. We thank you all for your time and interest, and we're eager to hear your questions before we wrap up. Don't be shy. Or comments as well and reflections on what you've learned today.
Hello, my name is Mariela Ramirez. I'm part of the LACC. I was born in Argentina, Rosa. I like the work that you are doing. Thank you so much. I'm in Kentucky. The question I have is Milk with Dignity. It's has a kind of agreement with our other states, or it's only in the east part of the US?
Is it only in Vermont? Yeah.
Sobre leche con dignidad solamente es aquí en el estado de Vermont, aunque estamos tratando de expandir el programa en otros estados.
So Milk with Dignity is right now on farms just in Vermont, and I would add New York State as well, in Nueva York.
Ajá, sí.
And through this initial agreement with Ben & Jerry's, because that's where their supply chain is based. And as we bring in more companies, we'll expand to new regions.
And the other question I have is related with the mental issues. Do they have any group who can support any cases, difficulties? The workers, our brothers and sisters are having with this kind of job, having no, help in case when Jesus explained about the health issues. What kind of support mentally do they have?
Exactamente aquí en el estado de Vermont no hay algo como específicamente para eso. Solamente hay una clínica que es Open Door, que es el que atiende como a los que están enfermos y todo, pero como un trauma más grande y todo eso no tenemos específicamente para eso.
There's very limited resources for that in Vermont where we're based. There is a clinic called Open Doors, which serves the farm worker community, but there aren't specific mental health resources that would support people with the traumas that they're experiencing.
I have another question, but I do not know if anybody else want to make any comment, and then I can go back.
I'm just curious if there are legal recourses for some to do denuncias for the really the abuses. Are there not legal research strategies that can be added or no?
Pues solamente ¿cómo es que se llama? Departamento de Labor.
Yeah,
Solamente pues, el Departamento de Labor es de que hemos metido algunas quejas, pero pues que se ha llevado un proceso un poquito largo para poder poner como una solución.
So outside the program, there's the Department of Labor, and we'll put in complaints about abuses happening on farms, but it takes a very long time to resolve those complaints. And I'll just add a couple of things onto that. And this model of worker-driven social responsibility was really an innovation for workers in industries that suffer from a lack of legal protections. So workers have had to create what in essence is a parallel system of rights enforcement within supply chains. So the code of conduct is workers' set of labor laws, and the independent monitoring that's created under the Milk with Dignity program, an organization called the Milk with Dignity Standards Council, becomes their Department of Labor. Because outside the program, workers are either excluded from rights, such as minimum wage, or those rights that do exist go wholly unenforced. And so that's why workers have had to create this parallel system, truly designed to enforce their rights. And Tess?
Sí, muy buenos días. Muchísimas gracias, Rosie y Will. Aquí estoy yo en Massachusetts, en Quincy. Y tiene unas preguntas para ustedes. So just thank you for such a great presentation and the clarity. And Rosie, for your commitment and just you and the workers. So I'm here in Quincy, Massachusetts, and there are Hannafords, as you know, around us here in Massachusetts. The one that was near to me is no longer here, but there are others. I'm also with Mass Interfaith Worker Justice, and we have supported some things in the past with work at Migrant Justice, and maybe after this call, we can do some more follow-up. I was hoping to be to come up with NFWM. I'm a former board member and staff person. So hoping we can continue some work here with Massachusetts. How has been the response been so far from Massachusetts? That's my first question. And secondly, also, what are the churches, what kind of support are you getting from the churches there in Vermont on the campaign? So 2 questions. Gracias. And hi, Mary Ellen.
So yeah, I can feel that one. Yeah, so just in the spring, in April, we had what we call an action tour going around the Northeast, and did maybe about half a dozen stops in Massachusetts. We didn't have one in Quincy, but we're in a couple surrounding communities. And it was really great to connect with folks in Massachusetts. We would give a presentation like this, and then at the conclusion of the presentation, at most of these stops, we would then go with the group to have a protest at the nearby Hannaford. So we did do that at a couple Hannaford stores in Mass, and those were really successful actions. But we would love to connect with you and your organization to follow up and see how we could be more involved in the future. For those of you who are in the Northeast, in areas with Hannaford supermarkets, we have what we call an Adopt a Hannaford strategy, where we're asking folks in their local communities to commit to taking action regularly at their Hannaford. That can be a weekly vigil, like a honk and wave every Sunday morning for half an hour. It could be getting together with 3 people from your congregation or 3 friends and doing a delegation to the manager, saying, hey, we're customers here and we want to see this company join the program. Folks can go to our website and find a toolkit with a lot of information about how to adopt your local Hannaford. So Tess, we'd love for you to organize folks to adopt the Hannafords around Quincy, and we can chat more about that after. We'll put our email in the chat.
That would be helpful. Are you in touch with the Jewish Labor Committee? Have they been part of the effort?
I don't know specifically.
Okay, I'll follow up. I don't want to take time, but we'll follow up after. And the second thing is, what about the church support? What kind of organized religion? That's any support there in Vermont or for the campaign besides NFWM? Sure, there is. There can always be more. So many faith communities, churches and synagogues have participated in actions at Hannaford, have adopted their local Hannafords, but we always would like to form new connections. So if folks know of churches in Vermont or the Northeast who aren't yet connected with Migrant Justice, please share this information with them and ask them to reach out or share their contact information with us so that we can reach out. But yeah, we're very grateful to have the National Farm Worker Ministry here in Vermont for this weekend. We'll be going to a Hannaford this afternoon to hold a protest and a picket and to deliver some of those complaints that we talked about earlier that have gone unresolved to date. And I'll just also mention, in addition to endorsements from the National Farm Worker Ministry, the National Council of Churches has endorsed the campaign and sent a letter to Hannaford, as has Presbyterian Church USA.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I note that we are at the top of the hour, but I've got 2 more people that I'd like to have an opportunity to speak. One has her hand up, and that is Maureen. And the other one is Lillian put a really good question in the chat. And Lillian, I'd like for you to have a chance to raise your question. Okay, why don't you go first, Lillian?
Okay, I just live in Ohio, and I was wondering, we have United Milk Dairies that covers our area, and they say that they work hand in hand with the workers. So there are different organizations that I'm wondering about throughout the United States. What or who might have similar migrant-related programs? other than Hannaford in Vermont. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Tienes que entender como el mismo que nosotros.
Si existe algún otro programa parecido
Sí, como el de Florida, que
en la lechería.
la lechería.
Yeah, sí.
No que yo
Yeah.
sepa, no solamente el que estaba como Giovanni, que supuestamente tiene como un programa igual, pero es como falso, no nada que ver con el programa de leche con dignidad.
So yeah, no program exists like Milk with Dignity. There are many companies that make claims. One of them, until recently, was Chobani Yogurt. They started putting certification on their yogurt saying that it was fair trade certified. But though that certification really did not have any of the elements that Milk with Dignity has that would give it validity. And they've since taken that certification off of their product.
So are there ways to find out what their background is, who their supply, etc.? I mean, you started some way, so. So that,
Yeah, I'll respond to that. So yeah, I mean, we're unfamiliar with the Ohio United Dairy, if that's its name, but United Milk, sorry. We would look very skeptically on any claim from any company about conditions in their supply chain that aren't accompanied by a worker-driven program like Milk with Dignity, because many companies make these claims, and Hannaford, of course, has been making them, but unless they're really backed up by a worker-driven program, the standards that a company says exist in their supply chain will not be reflected by the conditions on the ground. So to expand the model, Migrant Justice is part of this network called the Worker-Driven Social Responsibility Network that exists to promote these principles of worker-driven social responsibility and help to adapt the model to new industries and new sectors. So any worker organization that wants to learn more about how to transform the conditions in their industry should be reaching out to the Worker-Driven Social Responsibility Network to become involved in that process.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And Maureen, do you want the final comment or question?
Yeah, it actually, I just wanted to say while you were queuing up the video, I looked up their response to Milk with Dignity. And it's blah, 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 blah. And then they say the supply chain is too enormous and our effect on it wouldn't make any difference. And so I just want to thank you for your work in making a difference.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you. Well, I know we're over time, so for folks who have more questions, we put our email in the chat. Please do reach out. And if you have any leads for congregations or faith communities that could get more involved in this work, please let us know. And we really meant what we said earlier, and leaving comments on Hannaford's Facebook page is a daily routine. We encourage folks to be doing that to stay connected to the campaign going forward.
Okay, Rox, I don't know if you can turn your microphone on without providing some interference, so I
Okay.
will just,
I can
Go ahead.
now.
good.
Thank you.
Do
We have a tech person in the room. It's helpful. Okay. Hey, thanks everyone for showing up. We're going to go on with our National Farm Worker Board meeting, and we're going to be part of the event this afternoon at Hannaford's at the store here locally, and have a chance to visit with some of the farm workers there as well. So thank you everyone for showing up. Spread the word.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you.